When I first started playing TF2, the soldier easily became my second favorite class to play in the entire game. This was mostly because I hadn't unlocked any other primary or secondary, so I wasn't using soldier to his full potential. But all of that changed as soon as I unlocked the direct hit. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I first started using the direct hit, I was terrible at it, and I was only using it for one purpose, which was to destroy buildings, which is really what it's meant for. The way I used to play the direct hit was if the enemy team had several sentries or dispensers blocking our path, then I'll just immediately switch to the direct hit, deal with them, and then go back to stock. And for the most part this worked fine, but then I started to watch other people using the direct hit, and I realized that this thing isn't just good at taking down buildings, it can pretty much take down anything that it comes across. So I started to use it more like the stock rocket launcher, and man, have I been missing out. Needless to say, the direct hit became my favorite primary to use for soldier, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, why I think the direct hit is the soldier's best primary to use. But before I talk about how I would use it, we should probably talk about the statistics of it first. So first things first, let's go over what it does. It has a 25% damage bonus, 80% projectile speed, and it does mini crits to targets launched airborne by explosions, grapple hooks, or rocket pads. The only downside to this is that the explosion radius has been reduced by 70%. Based off of this information alone, it sounds like the direct hit is the ideal weapon when it comes to destroying buildings, but not so much when killing other classes because of that explosion radius. And just to give an idea of that 70% reduction, here's a simple diagram showing all of the rocket launcher's blast radius. As you can see, the direct hit is almost nothing compared to like the beggar's bazooka or the airstrike. You essentially have to hit right next to their feet in order to do some type of damage, and even then it won't be a lot. But for most players, the blast radius doesn't matter much because hitting your targets head on is where all of your damage is going to. So with that being said, now let's talk about numbers. Here's a simple chart that shows the direct hit's damage and function times. Its base damage is 112, its maximum ramp up is 140, and its maximum fall off is 59. If you were to score a crit with the direct hit, you will do a maximum of 338 damage, while a mini crit does between 152 and 189. So now that we know its damage output, let's compare that to the stock rocket launcher. If we were to compare both of these weapons, it's clear that the direct hit does a lot more damage, not just in terms of using it normally, but also when having crits or mini crits. However, something to point out with the stock rocket launcher is that it has the potential to do the same amount of base damage as the direct hit. If you aim the rocket launcher at someone at point blank range, you could do between 105 and 112 damage. And of course, the farther you get, the less damage you do overall. But the reason why you might be fighting at a far distance is because there might be a sentry nearby. And if that's the case, then the direct hit is clearly the better option, because if a level 3 sentry has 216 health, then you only need 2 rockets to destroy it as opposed to 3 using stock. But let's say you're not fighting sentries, you're fighting other people. Well, 112 damage is enough to deal with a scout who's using the Sandman. Of course, it won't be easy because you essentially need pinpoint accuracy in order to do the most amount of damage. However, if we take a look at the benefits of the direct hit again, it says that we can do mini crits to targets that are launched airborne by explosions. So if we were to add that mini crit damage, which at the minimum was 152 to the base damage, we can pretty much two-shot any class in the game except for heavy. But let's say that you're not lucky. Let's say that you suck at hitting targets mid-air just like me. Well, there's a very simple solution to this, something that many soldiers are familiar with, and of course, I'm talking about the buff banner. Now, I'm just going to say this once and it's really more of my opinion, but I think people who play as soldier should definitely use the buff banner a lot more, and not just with the direct hit, but really any other rocket launcher that does less damage than stock. It's just something that's a lot more beneficial for the entire team instead of using like the reserve shooter. But that's just me. Anyways, I think the buff banner is really the direct hit's best friend for almost any situation, but I think it's going to be most useful for hitting targets that are being healed by a medic. And I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to deal with a heavy that's being overhealed. But that's what the buff banner is for, and needless to say, this combination will shred anything like tissue paper. Well, maybe the only thing it might have trouble with is taking down a level 3 sentry that's wrangled, and maybe even a level 2 for that matter. But this only happens if your teammates aren't aware of what you're trying to do, and for me that's hardly the case because whenever I activate the buff banner, we usually go on the offensive, even if we're on defense. Of course, using communication is vital when you're planning to attack, but I never use voice chat, so I wouldn't know. But whether your teammates do or don't follow you, that doesn't really matter, because as long as you have good aim and are aware of your surroundings, you're pretty much a one-man army just waiting to dominate. And if you didn't, well, at least you know where to improve. So that's pretty much my take on the direct hit. I know that I didn't really pair it off with the buff banner in the beginning of the video, but even if you don't choose to use the banner, I think this is a better option than stock, even for experienced soldier mains. Now, do I think the direct hit is going to be everyone's favorite? No. Do I think this video is going to convince everyone? Probably not. But if you did manage to stick around to the end of this video, then I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to make more of these types of videos in the future if you guys want. Anyways, have a good day.